So today we're going to look at 2nd John, the epistle. He wrote 3 epistles, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, written by the same author as the Gospel of John, which we've spent the last few months looking at. I thought since I needed to have just a very brief subject to deal with before my retirement and before you get Sonny back, yay for Sonny, I thought 2nd John might be a good one to take a look at. It would be sort of interesting to see how John handles the different basis for his subjects. In the gospel, what he really wanted to do was create a sort of historiosity of the life of Jesus. He talked about his miracles and the truth that he told and all that sort of stuff. The epistles are more designed to address specific problems to specific groups. You know, when you read about Paul when he wrote Timothy and stuff, he was talking to Timothy about things that Timothy needed to deal with. And this is the case with the book of 2nd John. Now, this is, like I said, this is the second epistle. Epistle being the same as a letter, and it's addressed to an individual, from an individual, just like our forms today of our letters, you know, dear so-and-so, sincerely so-and-so. Dear mom, dad, I need money, sincerely your son, right? Same idea. It's very short in length. It's only 300 words, so we're going to fill up this morning with 300 words of Bible study. The 300 words could fit on a single sheet of papyrus, so it was very, very compact. And it was probably written in the latter part of John's life. You know, we have established he probably lived to about 95 years old, so this was probably written in his 80s, plus or minus a little bit. And this was when he was in Ephesus. He was ministering to the churches of Asia Minor out of Ephesus. He was sort of like the bishop of those churches. He was the overseer of those churches. I always find it interesting when the distances that people traveled in those Old Testament, in New Testament times, 2,000 years ago. I mean, we think nothing. We get on a plane, we go to Chicago, 3-4 hours later, we're there, right? That's not the case 2,000 years ago. People had to walk, or they had to take some animal burden, or maybe if they had a coach, perhaps, or a chariot. The distance from Jerusalem, where we last saw John, to Ephesus, where he's writing this epistle, is about 600 miles. It's a pretty big distance that he traveled, and that was sort of the world that he was dealing in. And it would have probably taken him at least a month, and probably more, to go that distance. Well, this epistle is going to deal with false teachers. And the particular false teaching that was being prevalent at that time was Gnosticism. And it was a threat to the church at that time. And Gnosticism was a cult belief that was plaguing the church. It had certain elements about it. I'm not an expert in Gnosticism, but I'll give you the cliff notes on this. They believed in dualism, first of all. They believed in God, but they believed God was spiritual and he was good. And they believed in a material world, so there is God and the material world separate. And the material world, even though it was created by God and God claimed it to be good, the Gnostics believed that it was bad. The second thing that the Gnostics believed, that God was incomprehensible and unknowable. That's a little different than we believe, right? God is a personal God to us. We have the opportunity to know him on a very personal level. The Gnostics didn't think that was the case. They did believe in salvation, but their thought of salvation was it just sort of happened like a flash, like a spark, like it just happened mysteriously. They didn't even know why, but they believed it could happen. And they believed that in comprehending what the world was about would only come by some secret mystical teaching. Sort of like the Buddhists do today. You know, they have this idea that nirvana is going to come to them somehow. Completely different than Christian thought. We know how to find knowledge and truth. It's in the Word, which we've been studying. Now, John is concerned because there's these itinerant teachers that are going around to his various churches that are under his tutelage, and they're influencing John's congregations. And the way they're doing that is these itinerant Gnostic teachers will go into a church and they will appropriate the Christian gift of hospitality. And they will ingratiate themselves to someone. The person will have the gift of hospitality. They will invite them in, and then that Gnostic teacher will start polluting the church body. John's very concerned about that. It reminds me about, you know, the warnings back in Exodus where it says, be careful not to make a treaty with those who live in the land where you are going, or they will be a snare among you. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles. Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. John's concerned that these Gnostic deceivers are going to have a great influence on his congregations. And it's no fault of the people in the congregations, because they're sort of unknowingly offering hospitality. We're called to be hospitable, and they're exercising that gift. But sadly, some of them are entertaining deceivers. And we'll see as we go through the word, the scripture itself, that some of his words are going to appear pretty harsh. He goes right for the jugular on this issue. And the warning, but that warning is necessary because the severity of the problem is so acute. He's going to address the people that read this epistle that they would recall the fundamentals of the faith, that they should adhere to truth and be obedient, and they should use hospitality wisely. In Romans it says, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. Share with those that are in need, practice hospitality. And we're going to see that love is an important component of this, but love isn't going to be a feeling with John. Love is going to be discerning, knowledge, so that they can make wise decisions. Without it, people that will be entertaining these Gnostics will be facilitating the propagation of false teaching. And John's very concerned about that. Now, John is in total disagreement with ecumenicalism, unity. He would not be in favor of the worldwide council of churches. He says there's a truth, it's narrow, but it's specific, and that's what we should adhere to. We should not embrace those that are bringing more than other things into the truth formula that's really not truth. And he's going to proclaim that truth must guide the exercise of love. Now, hospitality is a function of loving people, right? But it has to be based in truth, or there's going to be great trouble. And love must stand the test of truth. Truth determines the bounds of love, and consequently unity. And truth generates love. And we see in 1 Peter here, now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth first, so that you have sincere love for each other. Obeying the truth first, so that you can love. Love one another deeply from your heart. That's what Peter says. Truth yields love. Truth is so important for having an authentic and real love. And when truth is compromised, John will propose that love and unity are destroyed. That's my introduction. Now we get into the 300 words. Verse 1, 2 John. The elder. The elder, of course, is John. He likes to refer to himself as the elder. Well, why? Well, first of all, his advanced age. We think he's probably around 80 or so when he writes this. He's also the elder because he's the spiritual authority over the churches in Asia Minor. And he's the elder because he has the strength of that personal eyewitness testimony that he experienced with Jesus himself. He's the elder. He has equity. He has authority. So it says, the elder, to the lady chosen by God, and to her children whom I love in the truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth. So he's writing to a particular person. Some of the other epistles, you'll remember, like Ephesians was written to the church, or Colossians was written to the people of Colossus. This is written to a specific person. It's this lady. She goes unnamed, but it appears like she's pretty well known by John. I mean, you get a sense that this is somebody that he knows and thinks very highly of. And in this first verse, you notice that the word truth is used twice. And you're going to see that in the first 4 verses of this epistle, the word truth is used 5 times. Truth is a foundation that John is going to be driving home, because truth is the basis of relationship. Then in verse 2 it says, because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever. So John's saying this is a reasoned, conscious, intellectually derived truth. It's not a feeling. You have to put in the work. You have to put in the work to know truth. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here for right now. That's why we enjoy the sermons from the pulpit. It's because we're gleaning that truth. We're receiving it so that we can know how to go forward. It's not a feeling. It's a reality. It's an absolute. And in verse 3 he says, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, will be with us in truth and love. So I thought this sort of feels like this is God's formula for his dealing with man. Grace first. God offers grace. From grace, we get mercy. We get mercy. And then from mercy, we receive peace. That's the history of mankind, with God dealing with mankind. Grace, mercy, and peace. But all wrapped around this sphere of truth. It doesn't do any good if it's not have a basis in truth. Then in verse 4 it says, it has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as the Father commanded us. Isn't that great? This is such a close relationship between John and this lady that he has joy because her children are walking in truth. Just like we have joy when our children are walking in truth, right? Same thing. It's really a wonderful thing. And when he says walking in the truth, some of the translations say abiding in the truth, which means that they're making obedience to truth a habit. It's not an event, it's a process. It's a lifetime commitment. And that's what John is so joyous about. And then in verse 5 it says, and now, dear lady, I am not writing you a new commandment, but one we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. So he's tying this truth foundation to love, walking in truth and in love. Truth and love, truth and love, back and forth. We know from the past studies that we've had that John likes to reiterate. John, I think, is very concerned that we don't get it. And he wants to repeat it over and over and over and over and over again. We saw that in the gospel, and we're seeing that here, that this truth is an important concept that he wants to drive home. And in verse 6 it says, and this is love. Okay, the definition of love. That we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that we walk in love. Sort of circular argument here. Love is walking in obedience, and that we should then, because of that, walk in love. Love is not a sentiment. It's obedience. It's fundamental. It's a fundamental of faith. Oh, could you hear me before? Okay. It's a fundamental of faith is walking in love. So he sets this stage now for encouraging people how they should act, and now he's going to issue the great warning in verse 7. I say this, the whole lesson about truth and love, I say this because many deceivers, and what is a deceiver going to be teaching? Many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. Any such person is a deceiver and the Antichrist. Pretty strong words. And the believers must be on guard against this error. He's warning them. I'm in remembrance of putting on the breastplate of righteousness, the armor of God. That's what John is encouraging them to do. But to do that, they have to be intimately aware and acquainted with the truth. And we see today that that doesn't happen in many sectors. What is truth? Well, that's whatever we want it to be, right? Here's a couple good quotes for you. John Henry Newman, a theologian at the turn of the 20th century, said, "We can believe what we choose. We're not answerable for what we choose to believe." That's a convenient way to put it, huh? Or how about Clarence Darrow? You remember him? Great mind, legal mind. An idiot as far as it comes to theology. He says, I don't believe in God because I don't believe in the mother goose. Or how about even more contemporary? There's this woman, her name is Serene Jones. She's anything but serene, I'll tell you that right now. She's the president of the Union Theological Seminary in New York. This is a seminary where Dietrich Bonhoeffer studied. It was built in 1836, quote, founded on the infallible Word of God. But Serene says, I don't believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ, the power of prayer, a literal heaven, or miracles. Truth. Truth is being destroyed. And that's what John is concerned about here. 2/3 of the population of this country do not believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. Half the people in this country do not believe in a personal resurrection, that there is no heaven, there is no hell, that we just revert back to atoms somehow. I think Jane came up with, and I couldn't find the quote, but a large percentage of seminary students don't believe in the resurrection, maybe 1/3. Truth is what we have to hang our hat on. Truth is what we have to pursue, and truth is what we have to defend. And that's what John is encouraging these people to do that he's writing to here. And the lie that the Gnostics are guilty of here that John's challenging is that they do not acknowledge that Jesus came in the flesh. They're denying the true nature of Jesus. If Jesus didn't come in the flesh, it's all a lie for us, right? And that's just not the case. We know that's not the case. Jesus was all man. He was all God. He came in the flesh. Gnostics didn't believe that, and they were trying to convince other people. And that's what John is fighting against. Then in verse 8 it says, watch out that you do not lose what we have worked for, but that you may be rewarded fully. And that reward that loss of reward may occur if discernment is absent. And this is a severe warning. But the reward is that we are able to see Jesus purely and who he really is. And because of that, we can have peace and we can abide in that. But we can't do that if we offer comfort to false teachers or accept their teaching. And that's what John's so worried about. Verse 9, it says, anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and Son. This running ahead gives us idea that here we have the gospel, here we have the truths of Jesus, but we're going to add more to it. We're going to run ahead, we're going to add, we're going to supplement it. We know some religions that do that. I think they have an angel Mariah on top of their building. Marani. Sounds like an Italian restaurant. I don't know. But that's the running ahead that John's warning against. Don't run ahead. Do not run ahead. Where am I? Yeah. If you do, you do not have God. And whoever continues in the teaching, in the truth, has the Father and the Son. Truth leads to the knowledge of the Father and the Son, which leads to eternal salvation. And again, we see this in our contemporary space right now, that people are adding to the truth. You know, the whole prosperity doctrine, adding to the truth. Certainly, there's a nugget of truth in it, but they're adding to it. The whole gender identification debate, adding to the truth. Things that we need to guard against. And then in verse 10 it says, if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, the truth, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Wow, how harsh is that? So when a certain cult or sect knocks on your door and wants to give you something, their truth, do you invite them in? Not according to John. He said, do not take them into your house or welcome them. Harsh. Now this doesn't mean that you're going to avoid people with minor differences. Now all of us, I'm sure, have Roman Catholic friends. They have some error with their Mariology. We have error in our church, I'm sure. Everybody has error. What John is warning people against is those that actively want to destroy the fundamental truths of Christianity. There's a lot of side issues that can be debated. Whether you dunk or what do you call it? Sprinkle, dunk or sprinkle. Whether this or that. There's post-millennial, premillennial. There's lots of debatable issues. But the fundamental things, that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, that he is the Messiah, that is what we have to guard against. And that would be called heresy for those people that are promoting that. And John is saying no contact of any kind is permissible with heretics. And in verse 11 it says, anyone who welcomes them shares in their wicked works. Wow, it just keeps getting more brutal and more brutal with John as he's trying to drive this home. If you engage a heretic, it only adds in the spread of that heresy. And it gives the impression of that heresy being sanctioned by those that are going to engage the heretic. John's warning, stay away from that ledge. Stay as far away as you can. Whew, I'm tired. So I'm going to wrap it up. Verse 12 says, I have much to write you, but I don't want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk to you face to face so that our joy may be complete. Well, the paper is papyrus. The ink is a mixture of charcoal, water, and gum resin. And when he says, I want to meet you face to face, or talk to you face to face, it reminds us of Numbers, when God is talking to Moses and he says, with him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. This face-to-face contact eliminates the possibilities of mistakes and errors and misunderstandings, things of that sort. It actually literally means mouth to mouth, talking mouth to mouth, just like God talked to Moses. But it says that when they are able to do that, then their joy is going to be complete. And that's the blessing of hospitality. We are called to be hospitable. And the result of that is to have joy. Back in the first epistle of John, 1 John chapter 1, verse 4, it says, we write this to make our joy complete about hospitality. So when believers uphold the biblical standards of fellowship, of hospitality, the result is joy. I think we've all experienced that. Because the joy is because truth is maintained. Its basis is truth. Truth yields joy. Then he wraps it up in verse 13 and says, the children of your sister who is chosen by God send their greetings. And this refers to the nieces and nephews of the elect lady who's sending their greetings as well. So again, John has this intimate involvement with this person that he's writing. And with that, we conclude 2 John. And we can look forward next week to Sonny's return. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all for your love and encouragement for Jane and me. It's been a blessing to be with you and just a great joy. So in conclusion, would you join me in singing this little song, this little verse here? Oh God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come, our shelter from the stormy blast, and our eternal home. Thanks, everybody.